Hello and welcome to another Brawl video. Today we're checking out one of my all-time favorite command... Oh, 1 second. As I was saying, today we're checking out one of my all-time favorite commanders, Mythweaver, a 4-mana creature with power and toughness each equal to the number of lands we control, and whenever one or more non-token lands we control enter, for each of them we get to conjure a duplicate of it onto the battlefield, and the great news here is that they're untapped, and this ability triggers once each turn, so we can potentially trigger it in our turn, as well as once again in the opponent's turn if we maybe have a fetch land we can sacrifice in their turn, or some instant speed ramp spells that can put additional lands onto the battlefield. So the goal is very simple: ramp out our Mythweaver, put lots of lands in play, and then we've got a few effects that will maybe draw cards equal to our greatest power on the battlefield, and those cards can very quickly take over. So I've split the deck into a few different categories to help with the breakdown. Initially, we've got our early ramp cards to maybe play Mythweaver a turn ahead of schedule. Ways to put one extra land onto the battlefield are nice, but then the real exciting cards is the next section here, which are effects that can put more than one land in play at the same time. That way we can put more than one land in play with Mythweaver's ability, so we can really start going off. Then we've got our landfall section, effects that trigger when lands enter, or maybe help us replay lands out of the graveyard, also makes it easier to keep replaying our fetch lands. Then we've got our card draw effects. Some of them are incremental, some draw a lot of cards at once, equal to the greatest power or toughness among creatures we control. And then we've got our finishers, which are the cards we're hoping to ramp into to help close out the game. And then our miscellaneous section includes some additional artifact and enchantment removal. So that's our deck in a nutshell. The mana base, of course, has plenty of fetch lanes to synergize with Mythweaver as well. Now for the deep dive, starting with our ramp cards, we've got Arboreal Grazer as well as the Kami of Bamboo Groves to put an extra land in play right away. Can sometimes channel the Kami as well. And then we've got some traditional mana creatures, Birds of Paradise, Delighted Halfling, also important to make Mythweaver uncounterable. Then Elvish Mystic and the Llanowar Elves. Utopia Sprawl's perfect in a mono green deck with plenty of forests to enchant. And then we've got some 2-mana cards like Explorer, Glimpse, Into the North, and Rampant Growth, often good for putting one extra land in play. Fanatic of Ronas can often make 4 mana if we control a 4-powered Mythweaver. Then there's Arcane Signet, the World Wagon, a new one from Aether Drift, also quite synergistic with the Mythweaver as we can crew it on the following turn already. Flare of Cultivation is excellent with cards like Arboreal Grazer and Kami that we don't mind sacrificing, otherwise it's still a Cultivate. And then the Archdruid's Charm, being an instant, has quite a bit of upside, since that means we can ramp during the opponent's turn, so we get that effect from Mythweaver once again. And then we get to the effects that can put more than one land in play at once, and some of the better ones here are Entish Restoration, excellent with Mythweaver, as we'll have a 4-powered creature putting 3 lands in play at once. Then there's Harrow, which can sack a land to put 2 in play untapped, so then with Mythweaver that's 4 lands. And then Roiling Regrowth and Springbloom Druid are kind of the weaker version compared to Harrow, as the lands enter tapped. Then we've got Invasion of Zendikar, finding 2 lands, can also maybe transform our battle. There's Migration Path and Vastwood Surge as more 4-mana sorceries, finding 2 lands. Scapeshift can be incredibly powerful, as we can sacrifice all of our lands and then put that many lands in play and copy them with Mythweaver, assuming we haven't triggered the ability yet. And then Traverse the Outlands is also very good, as we can search up X basic lands, where X is the greatest power among creatures we control, so that can quickly find 10 or more basics once we're in the mid to late game. And then Lumra can also mill a few cards and then return all lands from our graveyard to the battlefield, so that can also get a lot of extra lands out of the graveyard if we played some fetch lands earlier. And Primeval Titan, when it enters or attacks, can also find 2 lands, and they don't have to be basics, so it can also find some of our utility lands for us. Then we get to the landfall section with Lotus Cobra and Nissa Resurgent Animist making mana for us, as well as the Provisioner making treasure tokens, so that's often even better. We've got our Azusa Lost But Seeking to play up to 2 additional lands each turn, so very good with all our card draw effects, or maybe with cards like the Walk-in Closet, letting us replay lands from the graveyard, so that's very synergistic with any of our fetch lands. We've got some creatures that can also win the game by themselves, like the Mossborn Hydra with Landfall, doubling the number of +1 counters, and Skewed Swarm going wide with lots of 1/1 copies of itself. We've got Courser of Crewfix gaining life and letting us play lands off the top. Oracle of Moldaya lets us play 1 extra land each turn and can also play lands off the top. And then Ashaya turns all our creatures into lands, so they can also trigger landfall, as well as maybe the Mythweaver's ability. Then we've got our card draw effects with Garruk's Uprising, giving Mythweaver Tramples pretty important, as well as drawing cards when larger creatures enter. We've got the Momentous Fall. We can sacrifice a creature as an additional cost to draw cards equal to its power and gain life equal to its toughness. So if we have plenty of mana, that can be worthwhile. We've got a Return of the Wild Speaker, which draws cards equal to the greatest power among non-humans we control at instant speed. We've got Rishkar's Expertise, which draws cards equal to the greatest power, as well as letting us cast a spell with mana value 5 or less from our hand for free. We've got Season of Gathering, which will often go for the draw cards equal to the greatest power mode, as well as putting a +1 counter on a creature we control, giving it Vigilance and Trample until end of turn, so that can also enhance the last ability, and of course get in for a ton of damage. Then we've got the Disciple of Freyalise, which we can play as a land, but also as a creature, sacrificing our Mythweaver perhaps, gaining X life and drawing X cards, where X is its power. Last March of the Ents looks at toughness instead of power, but that doesn't really matter for Mythweaver, cannot be countered, and then we can also put all of the creatures we draw onto the battlefield for free. The Great Henge we can often play on the cheap, and can also draw us extra cards, gain life, and make mana. Then we've got our finishers, including Nissa, who shakes the world, which essentially doubles our mana produced by our forests, can also animate some of our lands into 3/3 creatures. Kogla can fight an opposing creature when it enters, destroys artifacts and enchantments when it attacks. Tooth and Nail, often we want to entwine for 9 mana total, so we can search up 2 creatures and put them straight onto the battlefield, and those might include Hornet Queen making 4 flying insect tokens with Death Touch, alongside Craterhoof Behemoth, which will then pump up our team equal to the number of creatures we control and giving them Trample, so very nice alongside Mythweaver as well. But we could also get End Race Forerunners, which gives the team +2/+2 Vigilance and Trample until end of turn. Then there's a Vorinclex, doubling our mana while keeping the opponent's lands tapped down, as well as Nissa, Ascended Animist, which also gets better the more forests we control to set up the -7 overrun, which can also just win the game on the spot. And then I also like Force of Vigor, especially against decks that try to ramp with lots of artifacts, as we can maybe exile a green card from our hand to blow up 2 of them. And Pest Infestation can also be a nice mana sink, making lots of pest tokens and destroying up to X target artifacts and or enchantments. And then the mana base has lots of forests to search up, of course. Couple snow-covered forests for the one-off copy of Into the North. So I want to make sure we have a few snow-covered lands. And then some additional non-legendary lands that we wouldn't mind copying with Mythweaver. Castle Garenbrig makes it easier to ramp into our big stuff or replay our commander if it gets removed. The Gate can also be fetched with some of our green fetch lands and can then seek additional cards for us. Colony Garden making plant tokens, Lair of the Hydra as a creature land. Shifting Woodland can maybe copy something in the graveyard. And then we've got Cavern of Souls to make Mythweaver uncounterable. And then we also like Demolition Field and Field of Ruin, since we can activate them in the opponent's turn to blow up their non-basic lands, and then we'll trigger Mythweaver once again by searching up a forest. And then plenty of fetch lands, as well as a Radiant Fountain to gain 2 life, can be searched up with our Primeval Titan or maybe Archroot's Charm. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play, facing Liliana of the Veil. So we don't really mind if Mythweaver gets removed once or twice, as long as we can hit those extra line drops. This hand isn't perfect, but we can maybe Fanatic into Azusa or Vastwood Surge before deploying the Mythweaver, and then we've got our card draw already. So I'll try it. And then Fanatic we can also Eternalize if needed. Opponent's got an Evolved Sleeper. Now Into the North is nice. So we don't need to worry about having snow-covered lands left in the deck. And Tiny Bones can set up their discard synergies. Alright, Colony Garden coming up is good news, and that also protects Mythweaver from the -2 from Liliana. But yeah, let's Vastwood Surge for now. And then next turn, at the very least, Mythweaver into Colony Garden. Can also play Fanatic alongside it. So Azusa gets discarded here. Could still be useful once we draw more cards with Return of the Wild Speaker, but that's not a guarantee. Demolition Field, also an option, but yeah, I think it's gonna be Fanatic into Mythweaver, into Colony Garden, and then maybe discard Demolition Fields if they plus again. Hope to hang on to Return of the Wild Speaker. And if they have targeted removal for Mythweaver, that's not a huge concern. Sleeper attacks. They could level up twice. And then let's see, if I pay 6 mana... Yeah, I can replay Mythweaver and then still return afterwards. So I actually don't mind if they invest their whole turn in trading off. So that happens. Back to the command zone. Liliana pluses. And with a Fanatic we should be able to still cast our return using Castle as well, saves us a mana. And then I suppose I could still Migration Path, since the lands enter untapped here. And then we can still return. Yeah, the lands entering untapped is kind of ridiculous. And then I hadn't played land for turn yet, so I can play a fetch land and sack it in the opponent's turn to trigger Mythweaver once again. Discard 4 cards, maybe hang on to the fetch land. Kami could also be channeled to find more lands, but at this point we probably don't need it. There's no real counterspells to worry about, so Cavern is probably worse than a Forest. I guess her opponent can ultimate Liliana, so that's what they'll do. And in response, I could fetch. It does mean that they get to split up those lands as well, but it's probably okay. Get some gates to Manorborn.
Normally, I'm the one who chooses who lives and who dies.
And then it's gonna be pretty easy to keep 6 or 7 lanes. Yeah, it's not often that you can just shrug off a Liliana ultimate. So we'll sack the Mythweaver, keep the land pile. Back to the command zone. We did lose our castle, but we can still pretty easily redeploy it if needed. Alright, so play Mythweaver. Maybe I want to play my land beforehand, so I can cast something like a Roiling Regrowth at instant speed, and then Restoration at instant speed in the opponent's turn, assuming they don't remove it. Yeah, I don't hate that. And then we need to name Cat or Shaman. Don't think we have additional cats or shamans, but against mono black it shouldn't matter. Okay, so then ideally they don't remove the Mythweaver. If they do, I can still respond with an Andish Restoration. That's going to be a Vraska's Fall. So in that case, I guess we'll just Restoration now. Sack a land. Trigger Mythweaver. And then I could still Regrowth. Back to the command zone. Or we could Eternalize the Fanatic. Or play Oracle. I'll start with Fanatic. Get some value out of the graveyard. If they want to replay Liliana and minus, that's fine by me. Tiny Bones attacks. Maybe they're planning to cast a board wipe here, not sure. It was a Virtue Persistence, fair enough. And get to untap. Replay Mythweaver, and then... Again, I might want to play my fetch land first. Or I can just immediately cast Harrow. Or Primeval Titan. If I Harrow, they respond with removal, I can still Roiling Regrowth, so it's maybe safer than going for Primeval Titan. Alright, so we'll get 2 more lands. Trigger Mythweaver, get 2 more. And then, if we're afraid of a sweeper, I wait on Hornet Queen, or I could play it now to set up Craterhoof on the following turn. Could of course just play Primeval Titan, which is still decent. And get some utility lands, like Shifting Woodlands and a Lair of the Hydra. Could also get a fetch land. But I think I'm happy with Lair and Woodlands. And then I can still play a land out if I'd like. And our opponent scoops it up. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing a mono-white life gain deck. And our hand's got potential. Ramping out a Tooth and Nail is probably the plan. So I don't really need Disciple to draw me cards. So I'll just play tap now. And then we'll see if we want to play Mythweaver before the invasion or after. Already found our Craterhoof. It is possible we Tooth and Nail just putting 2 creatures in play from our hand without needing to search them up first. Alright, opponent's got 2 mana up. Could also play Azusa. Really want to try and get our value from Mythweaver, which this turn I won't be able to. So I could also play the Invasion, and then next turn at the very least I can play Mythweaver and get 2 Shifting Woodlands. Might be the safest play. Also possible they have one of the white counter spells in hand, but removal seems more likely. Going to be a Power Stone for the opponent, so they're also ramping. Okay, so Mythweaver, copy the Woodlands. And then I can still play Azusa and play an extra forest out. And then next turn I can cast Tooth and Nail with Entwine. Maybe finding a Hornet Queen alongside Craterhoof Behemoth. As our opponent makes a Pridemate 2 mana up. We'll see if they remove Mythweaver right away or keep up other interaction. Primeval Titan isn't bad either, since that will find 2 lands, which those 2 will be untapped. Tooth and Nail still seems a bit more exciting. And unless our opponent's got a Reprieve or Mana Tithe, that should resolve. Yeah. Let's see what happens. Alright, that resolves. So what's our best possible option? Checking my graveyard for Lumra. But yeah, I imagine it's just Hornet Queen. And could also go for Ashaya. Yeah, that could be fun actually. And then I could go Ashaya plus Craterhoof and get 2 Craterhoofs since we haven't triggered Mythweaver yet. I'm just curious to see if this works the way I think it will. Opponent had removal for Ashaya, but the trigger already happens. And in fact, Ashaya triggers itself, so we get an extra legendary which would have gone to waste anyways. And our opponent explodes. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Our hand's got potential. The combo of Azusa with Oracle lets us play a ton of extra lanes. Facing Imoti. So we'll see if it's a Cascade combo build or just kind of a traditional blue-green ramp deck. With Kami, it looks like our opponent's just trying to ramp, same as we are. No 1-mana acceleration for us. So we are definitely off to a slower start. But hopefully Mythweaver can make up for it eventually. Opponent's got the Visionary. And a Regrowth, so yeah, lots of 3-mana ramp. No 1 or 2 drops. So not the ideal curve. Also no extra lanes for Azusa to play her right away. But our opponent was missing a land for Imoti, it seems. Alright, so I have to play my fetch land. And then what makes the most sense, at least with Springbloom Druids, we can cast either Mythweaver or Oracle next turn. And we put something in play that can maybe trade for their creatures. Seems a little bit better than the Roiling Regrowth. Plus, being able to play this at instant speed means we can maybe trigger Mythweaver in the opponent's turn as well. So, time for Imoti. Cascades into a Guardian Project, that's nice, since they'll even draw an extra card off of it. And hitting a 4-drop with Imoti is always ideal. So if they have a land left, we could see more spells being cast. They do. Now, counter spells aren't super synergistic with Imoti, but they might still have some of the more powerful ones in there. Like maybe a Wash Away can still hit our Mythweaver. Oh, I'm surprised they're offering the trade for Lotus Cobra. So to play around Wash Away, may as well play Oracle and hope to play a land off the top, since we weren't going to trigger Mythweaver anyways. And we're about to draw Craterhoof, so quite the opposite from a land. Alright, so still hoping there's a land next, so we can go Mythweaver into a land, make a copy. Otherwise we're maybe looking at a Roiling Regrowth, which could also shuffle our deck. So I could shuffle away Craterhoof before drawing it, but I don't think that's the play. Wolfwillow Haven, that's okay. And a Sky Turtle just cast, so they can cascade into an Elvish Mystic. Draw 2 cards with Guardian Project still. So we're pretty far behind. Let's see if we can get back into it. Alright, there is a land on top. I can now resolve Mythweaver, so that seems like the window to go for it. Nissa on top. Wouldn't be able to play her, sadly. Okay, pass it back. But now we can maybe go off. Already have 2 lands in the graveyard for Lumera. Opponent's got the Great Henge, can also cascade into something big, hits a Growth Spiral. I'm a little worried about extra turn cards or effects like River's Rebuke. For now, just a Somberwald Sage. Still drawing 2 cards. And a Cultivate. Alright, so we're hanging in there. Mythweaver blocks pretty well on the ground, so we're just taking 6 from the turtle. But possible they've drawn something big in the meantime. No, they're still cracking the Mind Stone. And draw Nissa, find Glimpse on top. So I can either play Lumra or Roiling Regrowth. I guess Lumra now and the Regrowth in the opponent's turn might be the sequence. Could also go Nissa or Provisioner into Regrowth. And that triggers Landfall quite a bunch. Yeah, you know what, let's try that. And then we still have our Oracle to maybe play lands off the top. It's gonna be a Nissa instead. Although I guess we also trigger Nissa to find another Alpha Elemental, so that also shuffles our deck, unlike the Seek effect, which doesn't shuffle. And Traverse is next. So I can still cast a Lumra here, now with a guaranteed 3 lands in graveyard, although it's not going to trigger Mythweaver anymore. Could still play a Lumra, it still ramps us and triggers Landfall, so that might be reasonable, although I kind of want to draw the Traverse. So maybe it is just Provisioner into Azusa, and then if we get to untap with Mythweaver and Traverse, we get to combo off. I'll keep Mythweaver on defense. But if our opponent has something like Cyclonic Rift or Rebuke, playing Lumra was probably better since we put additional lands on the battlefield right away. Although I guess with 9 mana we could still play Mythweaver and Traverse, which finds 9 lands tapped plus 9 more untapped. So we can keep going from there. Opponent sacking a Wolfwillow Haven. Are they setting up a Craterhoof? Nope, just an attack for 6. So their hand must not be very good. Traverse is a sorcery. So I guess I'll go for it now. Unless we want to play the Hydra first, which I guess makes sense. Pick up those extra triggers. And go to Traverse before we play a land off the top. Okay, that resolves. Can only find basics. And that's a lot of landfall triggers right there. Go for treasure. And then I'll be able to cast the rest of my hand. I guess if we're worried about Cyclonic Rift, I could make some food tokens to gain life. But I assume that if they had Cyclonic Rift, we would have seen it already. More landfall. And then now with a instant speed Momentous Fall, I could also sack Mythweaver so that I get to gain a ton of life. And then our Mossborn Hydra's Parent Toughness is currently obscured. I'm going to keep it as a surprise, but you can start guessing how big it's going to be here in a second. In the meantime, Nissa makes a lot of mana. Alright. And we've got a 262,000 powered Mossborn Hydra. So I guess it's time for Craterhoof. Should probably play Vorinclex first. See if our opponent is indeed holding some instant-speed interaction. And then I guess I could still Lumra into Craterhoof for good measure. Still have that instant-speed Momentous Fall just in case. And get to trigger Landfall some more. Well, I appreciate our opponent sticking around. Not every day that you get to see Hydra getting this big. And yeah, maybe I should diversify and make some food, but I think we'll be fine. As long as I have the floating mana for Momentous Fall. And then I haven't played a ton of lands for turn yet. We have Azusa in play, so I could keep going. Sure, I'll make a food. Alright, and then may as well go all out. Elves into Craterhoof. And see what damage is like. I'm not going to want to sack the Hydra to a momentous fall, that would be a mistake. Alright, just a Boseiju on a Radiant Fountain, that's acceptable. Can't find a land. I guess they're just helping out now. Make some food. Can sank the food tokens before the floating mana goes away. And then still have that momentous fall available. Alright. I guess I still have one extra land drop left. I'm sorry, opponent. Azusa wants her extra mana. Alright, now we can go to attackers. Sadly, the Hydra's not getting in there, but 67 million. Yeah, I'd rather have momentous fall here than season, drawing cards equal to the greatest power among creatures we control, because otherwise there's not enough cards in my collection to draw here. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Phlage, so red-white could be more of a control deck or a burn deck. Our hand is okay. Kami we might want to channel, since we're light on lands in hand otherwise. Don't expect the Hydra to necessarily go the distance, but Courser can gain life, which is good if we're afraid of getting burnt out. So really just need to draw one more land here, so we can channel Kami. And then we're off to the races. Opponent's got Ragavan. Grazer's the perfect blocker. Although, yeah, we're currently unable to hit our land drop. Although World Wagon also sets up Mythweaver quite well. Opponent's got the removal, but we can draw now. Should I draw first, or do we let Ragavan hit us? I've got a feeling that there's gonna be a spell first. Alright, perfect, so they can play Provisioner. And then now hopefully we can draw into a land. So Ragavan has been unleashed. But we drew some lands. So could go for Courser of Crewfix, hope that can hold off Ragavan. Could just play the World Wagon, let Ragavan hit us once again, and then we're setting up Mythweaver, which can immediately copy the land from the World Wagon. That sounds better to me. Just playing Kami feels a bit underwhelming since the land enters tapped. So now 4 mana, could go up to 5 if they attack first. And yeah, Enduring Courage. Giving future creatures haste can be quite scary. Although no great henge, at least. So for 1 mana they could still have a Swords to Plowshares for Mythweaver. They're gonna tap out for a Shadow Spear. I think it's worth it to Mythweaver here, crew the World Wagon, and get our mana going. Suppose I can play Kami first. So we get in for more damage with the wagon. And then next turn we have a couple options. But Return of the Wild Speaker's looking good. Kami happy to trade for Ragavan, although they could suit it up with Shadow Spear now. And then Hydra can also grow very quickly. If they remove Mythweaver, we can easily replay it for 6 mana. So I don't hate my spot, but yeah, Enduring Courage is still a card we have to respect. At the very least, they could play Phlage, take out the Kami. Ooh, Mondrak to double their tokens. Okay. So I'll take 6. And Crater Hoof the draw. Don't think that's gonna be lethal just yet, although we are getting close. If I cast it after maybe crewing the World Wagon, so we control 3 creatures, then 4. everything gets +4/+4, so this goes up to 12 trample. This is 9, so that's 21, plus 5 is 26 trample. So yeah, I guess that would be lethal. Alright, it's a little boring here. But I'm not guaranteed to survive their next turn, so I'll go for it. And then I guess we grow a World Wagon even more after triggering Mythweaver here. So we've got a little bit of damage to spare. GG's. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Unesh. So mono blue is probably our worst matchup, since counter spells are the best way to beat Mythweaver. I could keep just hoping that a quick Cobra into Mythweaver can stick around, or we could mulligan looking for Cavern or Halfling. And yeah, the top end cards are a little too pricey for me to want to keep. Alright, we found Cavern, so that's what we needed. Even get a turn 1 Elvish Mystic. And opponent's got one of the many Sphinx creatures here. Sphinx of Foresight lets them scry 3. And they bottomed everything. So play Mystic. Next turn with Cavern I can just cast Flare of Cultivation. Because yeah, these will enter tapped otherwise. And we'll name a cat. Okay, so the next turn I could go Mythweaver into a tap land, copy it. And it is uncounterable. Start with a gate perhaps. And then next turn we can ramp both in our turn as well as the opponent's. Opponent did have a Sphinx to play at instant speed. And of course they're going to have some auras that can shut down our creatures as well, like Unable to Scream, the perfect answer to Mythweaver as well. So now Return of the Wild Speaker doesn't do much, so we're just hoping to ramp out a big Tooth and Nail. Currently have 7 mana, but then it's without Entwine. So I think we are trying to Entwine Tooth and Nail to still get there. In the meantime, I guess I could attack with a Mythweaver in the hopes that they block, but I don't see a reason why they would. Yeah, these enchantments paired with flying creatures is kind of the perfect recipe. Since you can just ignore the opponent's creature commander on the ground while shutting it down. And then we can regrowth in their turn, maybe catching them off guard. But if our opponent can just keep up a counterspell each turn for the rest of the game, there's not much we can do about it, since we're gonna die pretty quickly to these flyers. If we can sneak in regrowth into Tooth and Nail, then we might still have a chance. But yeah, opponent's keeping up 5 mana. And no additional lands for Mythweaver. Demolition Field doesn't do much. So I can try Tooth and Nail, or we could use the gate to seek non-land cards. Maybe that's the move, and then hope they tap out for Unesh next turn. And then we can maybe still steal a win with Tooth and Nail, or at the very least getting Hornet Queen can stabilize us. Just feels like this is not resolving if we go for it now. Traverse just gets 1 land here, so that's pretty sad. So I might be better off seeking with the other gate. And our opponent's going to cycle Curator, so the fact that they didn't cast it definitely implies that they have more counters in hand. So yeah, we found our cavern, but did not have an answer to the aura. Palladium Mirror, keep up 3 mana. Which I'm guessing is counterspell or a mana drain perhaps. And there's nothing else I can really do here. Can gain 1 with a fetch land. Uprising doesn't draw a card. So yeah, just gotta get this countered pretty much. Yep. Alright, that went about as we could expect. GG's. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing the Emperor, so Naya creature deck. A very strong commander in its own right. And I don't think this hand quite does it for us. Need some earlier mana acceleration ideally. Okay, this hand is a little awkward. Do have an Elves on 2, maybe Explore on 3. And then redundant card draw effects. So we'll go to 6. And this is our best hand so far. Don't think I'll need Pest Infestation. There's a chance they have some ramp artifacts we can blow up, but it's not a priority. And Kami into Flare of Cultivation is a nice start. And then we'll still have our fetch land to pair with Nissa. Opponent can play their commander. Could tap out and play Mythweaver, although there are some white removal spells that could still take care of it here. So I think I'm leaning Nissa, and then I can just fetch a basic. I don't need to get to gate yet. Play a land, trigger Nissa. And then I could either explore or play the birds. But Explorer has higher upside if we draw into another land. Which we did. Can maybe find a 1-mana elf and play it alongside the birds, but Mossborn Hydra could be its own win condition. So now we're hoping to draw some lands off the top with Oracle of Moldiah. Or draw into some other ramp card I can combine with Mythweaver. Alright, Trailblazer gets haste. And gets in for 4 alongside the Emperor. Alright, I'll take it. A land is good. So now I could go Mythweaver, play a land, and still play Oracle to maybe keep going. That's going to be better than just playing Hydra into Oracle, which is also an option. Nissa triggers twice. Finding a Lumra, which I can still cast here. At least one fetch land will get returned. Cannot quite go Oracle plus Hydra unless there's another land on top, which is a possibility. I think we just jam Lumra here. Although, saving Lumra for next turn for Mythweaver is also reasonable. Although if we mill a few more lands, I might be able to do multiple things here. You know what, I'll save Lumra, try Oracle, find a land, so then I can still play Hydra if I'd like. And then now, if Hydra survives with Lumra and Mythweaver, we're looking at a lot of damage. So can our opponents interact? Adlin is acceptable. Gets haste. 2 mana left. And do you have creature removal? Just a Ragavan. Alright. So it feels like we can block pretty well. Block Adlin. Block Ragavan. Eat a 1-1, take 7. And then I'm pretty sure we can present lethal here. If I play Lumra first, we probably maximize our Mythweaver, since we know there's going to be a land incoming, and our opponent scoops it up. So we'll never know how many lands Lumra can put in play here, but at the very least, the one on top plus the one in the graveyard, so that's 4 landfall triggers at the very least. Can still Vastwood Surge, so then, yeah, the Hydra is definitely getting in the 100 damage range. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Sorin, Imperious Bloodlord, so mono-black vampires. Our hand's a little top-heavy, but I think we can still make it work. And then, don't think I'll be needing Disciple to draw cards, since we have Season of Gathering. So turn 1 Aristocrats, who Into the North was a nice draw. Still reluctant to play Mythweaver until we can get immediate value. So next turn I'll start with a Flare of Cultivation, most likely. And then we can play Mythweaver into a fetch land, which can set up more fun plays in the future. Could also get our snow lands now that we've already cast Into the North. Doesn't really matter. Opponents go to Mindstone, so next turn we'll see Sorin. In the meantime, I present Mythweaver into a Misty. And then I may want to fetch now so I can Harrow in the opponent's turn, or we can just use Misty Rainforest. So we can maybe play around removal a little bit better. Sorin will minus. And what can they put in play? Alright, Vein Ripper, that's about as good as it gets. So we've got our work cut out for us. And then here we can get Gate to Manorborn. And then I'll hang on to my fetch lane for now, I think. Find a Garruk's Uprising, so that could help finish off Sorin. Could also Season of Gathering, maybe after we Harrow. Sack the Disciple, since we have additional synergy with forests. So get 2 more lands. And then now Craterhoof is also an option, wouldn't quite be lethal. If I Season, I'll still have 3 mana left. Possible playing Provisioner first was better too. So we have options for sure. Kind of like the Season of Gathering for now. And then could do this. And draw a million cards. And then I could still keep going here. Yeah, now it might be time to fetch, play a Provisioner, and then I can still play a Grazer while making additional treasure tokens. And put in either Colony Garden or Lair, since we have Grazer against any Edict effects. Lair's probably fine. And then could still Rampant Growth, could save it for next turn or just discard at this point. We'll finish off Sorin, and then next turn Craterhoof could present lethal. Yeah, I guess we'll Rampant Growth, since we'll just get another treasure out of it anyways. Okay, and then I get to discard 5 cards. Can hang on to my Migration Path. Yeah, we've got all the finishers we would ever need. Also, if I discard lands here, I could set up Illumina to be even more effective. So something along these lines is okay. And then the plan is Illumina first, get all these lands back while making copies. And then we should still have enough mana to do other fun things. Alright, Mind Spike. Can maybe take our Crater Hoof, goes for a Garruk's Uprising. Maybe they have a second discard spell. Just a Scavenger. Vein Ripper attacks, I'll take it, since Grazer still represents more damage with Crater Hoof. So then Cobra step 1, Illumina step 2. And yeah, that's gonna be a lot of extra mana. Can make treasures for days. And we might be able to play Hornet Queen into Forerunners into Crater Hoof. Get even more mana. Yeah, this is just silly. If we're worried about taking damage, we could also make some food tokens. But I should comfortably have lethal. So I can just empty the rest of my hand. Although I think I'll save everyone some time and just cast Curve Toppers. Okay, Hornet Queen into Forerunners, into Crater Hoof, and smash. And that should be more than enough. Alright, sweet. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the play, facing the Mouth of Sauron, a 5-mana 3/4. When it enters mill 3, amasses orcs, and then, yeah, that should be fine. Of course, blue means we'll have to deal with counterspells potentially. This hand is not perfect, it's a little slow to ramp. Provisioner may not make a treasure right away. I think I'll try something else. And this might be a little bit better. Might be a bit heavy on creatures, which are easily removed by their black spells. But at least we can present some threats that they will have to deal with if their plan is just to keep up counterspells. And now World Wagon has to be the play. Setting up Mythweaver, Crew, get an extra land next turn. Also have our fetch land we can copy, but our opponent is maybe keeping up a counterspell. So in that case, I could go Hydra, fetch land, trigger this twice. So then I could Crew the World Wagon. That's an option. And let's see if this resolves first. It does. Play a fetch land. I'll fetch. Possible they keep their removal for the wagon itself, or the Hydra right now. Better Triumph. Okay, that's fine. So now I can get a tap land like the gate. So we might have to play into a counterspell eventually. Although, for now... yeah, I guess I can still go Mythweaver. They counter. Next turn I can still replay it and trigger it. So that would be fine. Or we can maybe start going wide with a Skewed Swarm. The Trickery lets them amass orcs. Back to the command zone. And I probably still want to play the tapped land here. So the game goes on, just hoping that they tap out at some point, so we can get our Mythweaver going. But that's why blue decks are definitely the weakness of Mythweaver, between counterspells and other effects that can maybe shut down our creature once it's in play. Ooh, Ashiok prevents us from searching. So that shuts down our fetch lanes, World Wagon. But we can still just play Mythweaver and play a land. And then Crewing World Wagon still pressures Ashiok, even if we're not searching. Opponent jumps. And And then next turn it might be time for Scute Swarm. Chromatic Lantern works. And mill us for 4. Quick peek at what's exiled. So they do still have 2 mana up. Could start with Garruk's Uprising, and then we can still pivot from there. Bowmasters, so that will actually deal 1 damage now. But we will trample over it to finish off Ashiok at least. So they'll finish off the birds, can float a mana. And then now it might be time for Scute Swarm, which also would have been a fine Bowmaster target. So let me enchant a forest first. Play the Swarm. And then, do we prefer copying Demolition Field or a forest? Probably want a forest. And you can just play it from hand. Because yeah, the World Wagon is still stopped by Ashiok. So there's probably no point in crewing it, unless I guess I can do both by animating the lair. I can still crew the World Wagon. And then send 1 at Ashiok, 1 at our opponents. Could also go face with both. But I think getting rid of Ashiok is probably better, since we do have additional search effects we might want to use. Okay, opponent's at 13. We can now redeploy Mythweaver pretty easily. Our creatures trample, we're going wide with a Scute Swarm, so they need some pretty specific answers. And with Demolition Field we can also activate it in the opponent's turn to once again trigger Mythweaver and all our landfall cards. It's gonna be the other Ashiok. Definitely on theme here, bouncing our Uprising. Yeah, I think we hang on to it, even though it might trigger the Bowmasters once again. Trample seems useful. So play my land out, trigger Scute Swarm. Should have maybe stacked these differently, making the copies before resolving the Mythweaver trigger. So I definitely missed out on some value. But yeah, we'll make it work. Play Uprising, find a Fanatic, crew World Wagon. And this should just be lethal. Can also animate our Lair of the Hydra at this point. 4, 5, 6, 7. If I'm not mistaken. And smash. Finding another land in the process. Alright, and that'll do it. Awesome. Hello everyone, this is LVD coming to you live from the editing bay, and this is the video that you just watched. I can skip through the timeline real quick to show you. So this is the introduction. We've got the game against Liliana, the game against Ajani, and so on and so forth. So this is the video that you just watched. Get a little behind the scenes here, and if I quickly tab over to my MTG Arena account and look for my Mythweaver deck, you'll notice something peculiar. The deck is not complete, despite just having played it. And as we find out, I never actually crafted Mythweaver, so it was all visual effects, and I fooled you. No, okay, that's a lie. I did actually play the deck, but I felt pretty bad after beating so many opponents with it, that I pulled some strings and managed to get the card removed from my account, so I wouldn't be tempted to play Mythweaver ever again. So no more Mythweaver on this channel, it's been fun. But yeah, that's gonna do it for today's gameplay. I wanna thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.